I remember in 2017, I got into a few routines. Cold showers before bed, smoking tobacco cigars, and sitting out in the snow, drinking lime LaCroix and canned teas, like Arizona. Smoking a fair amount of weed, drinking cheap whiskey. I remember the cold winds and the bright lights around the trailer I was living at, except outside. It was like there was a lot of street lights. The street lights were really dim. I would go outside to a cramped shed and pull out a small white plastic bong and smoke little amounts of weed I had. I would get such head highs that I just record a ton of drone music. That was my favorite around the time. I think there was an album called Affirmations just around that time. There's just a lot of material like that. Eventually, I started taking stronger projects, recording like metal hitting metal. Are recording me hitting metal shovels with grill equipment and sampling movies that I enjoyed around the time, and even locking myself in the shed for extended periods of time when it was cleared out and there was only a mattress and a TV in there. I was becoming more and more manic and unsatisfied, drinking excessive amounts of energy drinks and CBD water, eating Twinkies and a ton of sugary candies that I familiarized myself with in high school. Probably a year prior, I started smoking heavily and being more reclusive. So this was around 2017. Or, yeah, in high school, this was like a year after high school. I was late into the year of 2017, and I graduated sometime in 2016. But I started smoking heavily and being more reclusive. And this turned into the empty cut sessions, which was a month long process of mentally exhausting myself and thinking of new songs every time I'd leave to eat, use the bathroom, or shower at night. And I had a group of friends too, affiliated with the Neo Noise Collective and Will Wade. The times were extremely drawn out, and I was extremely happy with how the new material sounded. I finally released it, and that was really the tipping point for my mental health issues. Of course, this was my first major step out into this musical genre, and I've always thought of myself deserving of the pain that I had because I didn't make good music, but I genuinely was proud of this project, and it had extremely poor reception, and it put me in a bit of a spiral. I went on to record the album TWIATP, or The World is a Terrible Place, an exaggerated emotional journey through self-hatred and loathing, mocking of everything I held sacred. From reflecting on my prior relationships to questioning my very own existence. This album was a drunken mess. The sessions that came out of this were more hard to really round out. I had a lot of material that I ended up erasing. And there's a lot of unreleased material, like the iWatch sessions. That's a good example of the mediocre. And there's one more album I really don't like from around that time that goes over the process, so you can really get into my headspace. But the YouTube stuff I made December 27 to January 2018 Part 1 and 2 albums are both good ideas of just how my headspace sounded. That was like just live improvisations, just a session of improv. There's another album I released, or a few albums I released of recordings around that same time. It was on that black album with the pistol on the cover. It was like a box set in a sense. But I have embarrassing stories of playing loud feedback noises at night and screaming when no one was home for music compilations, and of course a handful of power electronic projects I have a lot of regret about, inspired by late White House and apathy. Really garbage material. I don't like this stuff looking back. Also, at the time, I was messing around with Klonopin pretty heavily and mixing it with alcohol for like the majority of the TWITP sessions and a little after. This is after I had a run-in with opioids for a tooth pulling, but the benzos were much worse. I was constantly loopy and just extremely angry. I ended a hefty bit of material after I had a falling out with family and started breaking stuff, including my wrist. I fractured it on a wall, and I got kicked out for a bit and ended up in hospitals getting x-rays. Just in general, this was a pretty harsh point in my life. And showering with a huge piece of plastic fabric, thing just around your hand is extremely difficult to do. This wasn't a plaster cast, luckily, because this thing was an absolute nightmare with itching. I also get infections and humidity easily, so I threw antifungal under it at the beginning or end of each day. I messed up a ton of stuff. And the end of this was me throwing my weed pipe into the forest and just focusing on music, holding off on pills and drugs. Walking more, seeing the paths and forests, walking into my old hometown to see friends, and inviting them back to play GameCube. And we played True Crime, Streets of New York, and some SpongeBob games. It was a pretty fun time. I just remember that time. Yeah, we walked through these paths, just like a nature reserve kind of thing. There's a lot of work done in the forest where I used to live, and it used to be right behind my house. So they would just come over and they'd sleep in the shed with the mattress, and then in the mornings or in the afternoons, just during the day, we'd walk along those paths. It was a pretty great time.
I used quite a bit of subversive topics, themes, aesthetics back in the day. Somewhat as a tribute to the projects that I enjoyed. A lot of those projects now seem rather tasteless, and so does my checkered past, but I don't think that just making it vanish or disappear is the best course of action for my subversive history, because I've always been somewhat of a subversive person. I do subversive things, edgy things, and I don't think that's a reflection of how I want to be perceived. I do want people to think, what am I trying to say? What is the end goal? Is this a metaphor? Is this a reflection on the current cultural and political climate? I would say back a few years ago when I started, 2015 to 2017, I was very naive. I was very naive in my approach, but I think there's enough empty space for you to insert your own meanings to the projects themselves, and I don't want to distance myself from those projects because they came from a very genuine and angry place. You can really see that peak or start peaking around 2016 or 2017 when the projects became more drone oriented. It was me switching from one theme, one aesthetic to another in a very radical shift. It wasn't me trying to distance myself from my past. It was me trying to gain back control of my own reality, because I was undergoing some pretty heavy things. And I used all of these different ideas to cope with myself, and it comes out in my art. And when it comes back into my art, it's really interesting to draw your own parallels and conclusions. I grew up really interested in true crime, and I regained that interest in high school, late in high school. I regained the interest in true crime and just like those rabbit holes of exploration. Even now, I'm still very interested in those things. Now, I'm very interested in like a fictional manner. I'm trying to learn all about things, people. I love people, but that's where the true crime comes from, a reflection of humanity. Now, I will say the original philosophy of the project was supposed to reflect society's negative traits, negative aspects. And that was kind of that duality theme that was there from the beginning. Natihil was meant to be more of a literal, like, just no gray area, just words. Natalism, which was like a pro-life movement, and nihilism, which of course is just like, oh, nothingness. But it was supposed to be taken for word value. Like, you weren't supposed to think about it too much. It was just like those conflicting philosophies. Of course, those philosophies can mean quite a bit of thing if you reflect on those. But like natalism, pro-life, is it really pro-life? You know, it's confusing, but that duality was supposed to be represented within my music. It was supposed to be the night and day, but it became too reflective of the night, while the day was supposed to be the implications. What does this exist within? And I wanted to bring more night. It's a very confusing topic, because in those days I was more manic energy. You know, I was a ball of this manic energy trying to reflect on something around me that I thought seemed a bit confusing, or less confusing to a teenage mind. It's a very interesting look. I think that with the right approach and the right information and the right context, it would make far more sense than I could ever explain. But I do want to at least reflect on some of those old early philosophies with those old, early aesthetics, and give it some context, because I don't know if I ever want to distance myself from that. Not because, like, I grew out of it. I just think that it's a part of me and my growth as a person, and it's really taught me empathy. It taught me how to grow with the world around me and finally find my place in this world and see myself in a less individual sense. See, it's a very confusing thing to explain, because you have to really explain the full situation, and there's a lot of off-topic things and things that go off-topic,